Welcome. You're watching the Moody Lawyer. Justice served with experience and integrity.
Hello and welcome to the Moody Lawyer with attorney Josh Moody. With a rich background in law enforcement and a comprehensive legal career spanning criminal justice, personal injury, and civil matters, Josh offers a unique perspective on navigating the complexities of the legal system. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and today's episode is Rolling Justice: Legal Landscapes for California Trucking Accident Victims. Josh, welcome back. Good to see you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So what makes trucking accidents in San Bernardino and Riverside counties particularly complex legally?
Well, start off in San Bernardino County and Riverside County, we have a very large system of freeways and interstate. So you have a lot of trucks coming in and out. We have large distribution centers and covers a large landscape. I mean, San Bernardino County, it's known, is larger than the tri-state area, multiple states like Connecticut, Delaware, Vermont, all those states combined. And that's how much land there is in Riverside and San Bernardino County. So you got a lot of inventory coming in and out, and a lot of trucks are the way to move them.
And you Californians are always on the road.
And they're always on the road 24/7, night, day, it never stops.
It's crazy. I've been out there. My brother lives out there. I have some friends out there, and yeah, it's pretty wild. It's sort of a cliche, but it's very true at the same time.
And people don't realize in California, we do have special rules for truckers that people forget about. The speed limit's different for truckers. Very few states have multi-tiered speed limits. And once you get down to San Bernardino County, the speed limit changes to 70 miles an hour for most cars. However, the speed limit for big trucks and anybody towing a trailer remains at 55. Those are sometimes keys that are missed, especially if you're trying to claim that the truck was driving too fast, because speed limit's an issue. And the reason the speed limit is lower is because big, heavy trucks tend to take a lot longer to slow down, which is why they want a lower speed limit for these trucks. Riverside County is the same way. It's going east and west. Once you get outside of Riverside in the Beaumont area, it's straight out to Arizona on 4-lane roads and 2 lanes in each way. And the same rules apply.
Can you walk me through what happens in a typical trucking accident case in California?
Well, I guess it depends on what your definition of typical is, because trucking, they're all, especially truck accidents, are very different. Even a rear end, a rear end truck, a big rig smashing into a little car is just going to leave lots of damage. So those are always an issue. And, when you're talking about large, heavy objects, the injuries tend to be bigger than they are, when a 6,000 pound car, but still weighs a lot less than a big rig. So the injuries are always different. And the other difference, the key difference that anybody will tell you with trucks and trucking companies is they have different levels of insurance that normal people aren't required to carry. So they typically have to carry bigger policies because they do cause bigger injuries. The other issue is every time a trucker gets into an accident or any type of, it doesn't even have to be an accident, just some type of property damage type issue. Those are documented and filed against their license and with their company, because you're talking about a very special, specialty. It's not everybody can drive a big rig. It requires a special license, and this is their livelihood. And every time they get dinged for some type of infraction, it is important because you're expected to follow the rules better than the average person who just turned 16, 17 years old and gets a license and goes out, gets a $15,000 auto policy and is able to drive. So the standard is a lot higher for them, and it should be. This is their job. We expect doctors to do their job. We expect people who drive very large, big rigs to do their job as well, and safety should come first.
Absolutely. What is the statute of limitation law regarding personal injury cases, including semi-trucks and other large commercial vehicles?
It's typically 2 years. It can change. It can change if some type of government entity is involved. Sometimes if there's some type of medical malpractice, then that would change as well. But the general rule is 2 years.
I'm sure there's many, but what would you say are the key factors that determine liability in trucking accident cases?
Just the rules of the road. They apply to everybody. And like I said earlier, there are more specific rules to truckers that don't apply to the regular standard vehicles, mainly because they are required to go slower than an average car because it takes them longer to slow down. They also have more record keeping. Big rig truckers are required to keep a log where they are, how they're going. And nowadays it's pretty common. It used to be not so common several years ago, but now satellite information and black box information is in just about every truck nowadays, just for legal reasons.
That's a big point, is the black box. And I'm sure cell phone use can be a factor that they can pinpoint and things like that. What are some of the most common reasons that a trucker might be at fault?
Speed is number one.
Really?
They're in a hurry. They're in a hurry, especially middle of the night, middle of the day. They're trying to beat traffic. They have time limit to get their load to a certain destination. So, and just like any other business, the faster they get there, the more they can pick up the next load and be on the road too. They are required. There are certain rules that they have about how much they can drive in how many hours. And then there are union rules as well. But and sometimes they have shifts. So one person will drive, the other person will sleep. But speed is typically number one. Unsafe lane changes. And again, in California, we have lane control. So a lot of people don't realize it, and a lot of trucks forget it. On a 2-lane road, they have to be in the right-hand lane unless they're passing. So if they're just driving in the number 1 lane and they hit something or cause an accident, that could be a huge contributory negligent factor for them driving because they're not supposed to be in that lane. Also, on a 3-lane road, they have to be in the far right lane unless they're passing. So again, you'll see truckers all the time driving in the middle of the road. And if they hit something that they should have otherwise been to the right, their safe speed would be 0 because they're not supposed to be in that lane. I've also had cases where trucks, are on the side of the road, like on the shoulder, and unsafe lane changes. That's a big one too.
Yeah. So does the black box track how many hours they're going for at a time?
So it depends. Black boxes are kind of around, but also satellites. Satellite information is a lot more accurate. And a lot of the reason the satellites are on a lot of these trucks is because of stolen trucks and stolen loads. So they can pinpoint those tend to be a lot more accurate. But the black boxes, they do show times and dates. And it's a data dump for sure. And maybe one day I'll get one of our experts who does a black box data dump to come on, because what they do is really impressive.
Love that.
Yeah. But it does show that, but it doesn't show necessarily that maybe a person changed. That's what the vehicle log is for. But here's another key thing, which you just triggered my memory, is a lot of times they do have video inside the cabin as well as outside the cabin. So we've all seen the car cams or the truck cams where it shows outside, either the front or behind you, and it kind of shows that way when people say, oh, I wasn't changing lanes, and we have you clearly changing lanes. But they also have video inside the cabin as well to show who was driving and what happened. And I had a case last year, well, it took several years, it finally resolved last year, where the trucker just fell asleep, and the inside the cab video showed him he just nodded off and crashed his truck, which resulted in severe injuries to my client family. So, but one of the trucks didn't have inside the cabin, which is fine, but it is pretty common. So, things that were kind of new and revolutionary 10 years ago are pretty commonplace now. So those are some key things. And, in a regular car accident. So Teslas do have cameras all outside around their vehicle, but I haven't seen one yet where there's a camera inside the car. So trucks and truckers do and should have cameras inside the cab.
Yeah, the satellite stuff is interesting because I happened to notice the Sopranos poster behind you, and I started thinking about trucks getting hit by the mafia. I guess it's probably a lot harder to do now.
I think they had a couple episodes about that.
Yeah, they might have. Yeah.
Well, when I was a police officer, and I worked down in Fontana, where we have a large trucking central. It's Valley Boulevard. Anybody who knows the area is familiar with it. All kinds of truckers, all kinds of trailers. But back then, the big thing was LoJack. And you'd have to kind of, like, the companies, when they lost a load or a load got stolen, they'd have to LoJack kind of worked like it was a tuning fork. Its signal will get stronger as you get closer. But now, it's just, they know where you are. And even if they try to find it and pull it out, there's backups, and they're just going to catch you.
They're going to get you. They're going to
find it. Yeah, they're going to find their load.
Can you explain the role of federal regulations like FMCSA in trucking accidents and how they apply to cases in California?
Well, the guidelines are federal, particularly size, governors on the truck. So those are big rigs are governed at the federal level. And then we also have the National Highway Transportation Agency, I think is what we call it, NHTSA. Those set a lot of the standards for not only for truckers, but for a lot of the rules of the road for other vehicles as well. So a lot of that deals with, was the truck in compliance? Was the vehicle in compliance with, or was the company who owns the truck in compliance? But speed limits and other rules of the road are just set at the state level, and they're specific to California.
Does the size and weight of commercial trucks impact the accidents? I would imagine that can make the severity of injuries worse, right?
Oh yeah, because you have so much more weight going towards something or through something, it takes a lot longer to stop. And in California, we also have weight stations. Every 50, 60, 75 miles or so, it seems like there's another weight limit where truckers are supposed to pull over, and they're supposed to make sure that they're weighted so that way they're lower than the required weight for the state. And they also have to follow certain when they're hauling hazardous materials. That's a huge issue too.
That's true.
I forgot about that. We kind of glazed over it. But it's one thing if you're Amazon, not to pick on them, but you're Amazon and you're hauling a bunch of pencils and books, toiletries. Somebody bought something on Amazon Prime they want in 2 days because they need some deodorant or something. That's one thing. But when you're talking about hauling things like gasoline, nitrous oxide, and we've seen here recently in California where the ion lithium batteries are crashing, and the fire department can't put it out because they have their own oxygen, and they just burn for days, and they burn a hole in the freeway. Those are different things. So do you want, the big rigs that are hauling, everyday essentials or just junk is one thing, but when you're hauling hazardous materials and biohazardous materials and flammable materials, there's no reason to be going even 1 mile over the speed limit.
Right.
And those things are controlled at the federal level. And when there is an accident, I think you kind of look at the back of a trailer, you'll see like the little diagonal.
Right. I can picture that.
Yeah. And that way you see what's being hauled. It won't tell you specifically what's being hauled, but it'll tell you what classification it is. Mm-hmm. If it's a hazardous material, if it's a flammable material. So when you look at those things, those plaques are required to be on there, and that's also there. So that way, when the fire department shows up, they know what they're dealing with, at least categorically what they're dealing with. Yeah.
Yeah. How does a driver's history and employment status influence the outcome of a claim?
Because if you've been told multiple times to slow down and you still haven't done it, I have a pretty good case that you were probably driving too fast in this case, in this case too. And it's just one piece of evidence. You still need an expert or somebody to show that at this particular time you were speeding, but it's coupled with, okay, look, I have this person who testifies based on the skid marks and your black box data and everything else that, and your log. And I've done it before too. You admit and you testify to, and we have you on video, that you got gas in Las Vegas at such and such a time, and yet you made it to, Barstow in an hour. I'm making it up. We can figure out your average speed. You're not doing the speed limit. There's no way your average speed is 20 to 30 miles over the speed limit. So again, it's not dispositive, but it's a combination of everything.
Yeah, that's the overall picture. Sure. I know insurance companies don't like to pay out, obviously. And when you're dealing with large companies, trucking companies and delivery companies and whatnot, it can get even more dicey. How common is it for insurance companies to either offer meager settlements or flat out deny a claim?
Every time. They don't, for the same reason that they have to defend their driver. This is their livelihood, and they're not looking to, it's the same thing when you sue a doctor. Doctors don't settle. They don't want to settle because it's their reputation on the line.
Sure.
Truck drivers don't want to settle either. The companies don't want to settle either because, this is their business. And, again, going back to Amazon or Walmart, their business is delivering goods. If they have a lawsuit on their hand, they don't want to just admit liability and move on. And they're going to try and find a reason why the car, why the little Nissan who was driving the speed limit is at fault or what, so I don't think I've ever had a trucker case settle. I guess I had a very small one settle in pre-litigation, but for the most part, you have to go through litigation and sue them because they don't want to, because it's their livelihood and it's their business.
What would you say are some of the biggest challenges you and your clients face during the process of a semi-truck or a commercial vehicle accident case?
Every case is different. It's hard to say. Obviously, the extent of the injuries are different. So, somebody who dies in a trucking accident is going to be treated, is going to go through things differently than where maybe the car was completely destroyed, but you're still walked away from it and you're, injured. I think probably for the reasons I said earlier, where they don't really want to settle. They want to go through the litigation process. So that inherently adds time, and you have to go through depositions, and they always have, they have their they use the same experts over and over. The companies, it's like they all know each other. So they're going to go through the process, and they're not going to want to admit liability. They're going to want you to settle as low as possible. And I mean, I've seen some very, very comical offers, even after we file a lawsuit, comical offers. And of course, the denial of liability all the way through trial, because they don't want to admit anything, because they'd rather have to be told and shown that they're wrong than to admit it.
Than to say that they were wrong. Yeah. Interesting stuff.
It's part of their business. It's a big part of their business.
It's a business. Absolutely.
And the same is true even within work comp, where a trucker is hurt through work comp. The company a lot of times doesn't want it, because going back to, there are federal and state OSHA guidelines. If somebody's injured on the job, it can come back on the company about why was your place not safe. And they are, if it's one thing is that we as a society expect high standards from these companies for safety and documenting those safety. So they don't like to admit it when they're wrong, or if there's a break in their chain of why the situation was unsafe.
Yeah, if their process wasn't correct, they don't necessarily want to take the blame for it.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for tuning in to the Moody Lawyer with attorney Josh Moody. To connect with Josh, head to moodylawyer.com, and please like and subscribe to our channel and leave us a review in the comments. Josh, always great to talk with you. Looking forward to the next one.
See you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.